Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Quick introductions. My name is Erway. I'm the Senior Manager of Product Management for our merchant and shopping experiences. Nishant?
And hey, everyone, my name is Nishant, and I am a product manager on GraphQL, microservices, and extensibility. So good to see you all, and thank you for being here and listening to our presentation.
Great, thanks, Nishant. So today we're going to take a little bit of a different turn. We've done this talk several different ways, but we wanted to really take advantage of the developer-led audience that we have today here at MageCONF. And so we encourage you to ask a lot of questions. We want to make sure that this is incredibly valuable for everybody and really starts to build on some of the themes that you've heard all day, starting off with Jason at the keynote through some of the sessions throughout the day on Headless, both from our partners, but also from other folks at Magento. So today, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the changes that are happening in Magento 2. Again, changes in the air. Change is a very big part of what we're doing, but that's okay. A lot of the things we're doing have a lot to do with these 5 major areas. We are improving heavily the developer experience. If you look specifically on things like PWA Studio, James Etland and team started his journey over 2 years ago on what it means to improve the developer experience, the workflows, et cetera, on what it means to work with Magento 2, especially at the front end. We're adapting for the mobile-first economy. There's recent data now from Adobe that starts to show the eventual takeover of mobile as the primary device used by shoppers. There's an interesting gap that's happening. So use over conversion certainly for another talk, but we need to start preparing ourselves if we haven't already on a mobile-first experience. We also need to make sure we're optimizing for speed and the need for change. You've seen a couple different tools and a couple different talks today around not only creating lightning fast experiences, but also monitoring and optimizing these as well. In addition to that, extensibility has been a big piece of what we're talking about today. And so we want to make sure that we're extending for dynamic, superior shopping experiences. And then last but not least, we want to make sure that the business users, the merchants, the marketers are part of this journey as well. We want to make sure that they have a say in this. And so building on some of the great work we've done around Page Builder and making sure that they have a say to make even some of the smaller changes that sometimes may have taken days versus hours or minutes. We want to make sure that's the case as well. So none of this should surprise you, but we really are looking at this holistically on the Magento 2 platform, and a lot of the themes that you've heard today on some of the future and near-term work really supports this. So the big question is, how are we changing? And the answer is headless. So as we'll start to talk about here in just a little bit, between both Nishant's section and mine, headless commerce decouples both the business logic and the transactional and data aspects of commerce from the presentation. It's a term that we really have been doing for a long, long time. Magento 2 has been doing this with REST for many years, even SOAP for those who have been here for a long time. And so we want to capitalize on the infinite extensibility and the flexibility of the platform, but ultimately, we needed to modernize it. And so if you've been looking at our journey for the past couple of years, going all the way back to Magento 2.3, our journey continues and started really with the traditional approach for Magento. It has come all the way and is coming full circle down to headless. So if you compare these different approaches, traditional itself really has a lot to do with Luma, Magento 2, the APIs as we know them. It's a matter of the monolithic approach that we've done things, again, since 2015 and even before. It's about using PHP, UI components, default storefront and themes, centralized content and authoring, and then a fairly standard build, optimize, and deploy approach. But over the past couple of years, we've been looking at a more decoupled way to do so. We've adopted a more semi-monolithic approach using tools like PWA Studio and others, and we're starting to embrace what eventually will be the new front end for Magento 2, that is Venya. But PWA Studio, Venya, and others are more than just a theme, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in here in just a couple minutes. But what that's starting to do is build on top of a more decoupled approach, an eventual headless approach for Magento 2. Again, for those who follow us regularly, this shouldn't surprise you. Some of the work that Nishant will talk to you about, especially around Storefront API, takes advantage of the work that in the coverage that's already being built and in many ways accelerated by way of our community, and making this really a more flexible platform in the long run. So we're really excited about these changes, but there really is I would say, a strategy to what we're doing. But if you're looking at any one particular point, sometimes you're going to have some questions, and that's okay. So let's talk a little bit about the head. So PWA Studio is really going to help us go from what has traditionally been a Luma-based front end to a Venya-based front end. But again, we know that there's a lot of questions about this. So where does PWA Studio fit within Headless? Again, we've heard a lot about this. I talk a lot about this as well, especially to business audiences. But the reality is PWA Studio is designed to build, optimize, and deploy PWA on the Magento 2 front end, or on the Magento 2 back end. And ultimately, it's a series of components. It's a series of hooks. It's a series of reference resources for you to get started. And we're really proud about some of the work that's been done. We're even more proud about the community involvement to date that we'll go through here in just a minute. But ultimately, this is way more than just a theme. This is a brand new front end for Magento. And we're starting to see a lot of growth happen really in the last couple months as people start to make this a priority, not only with their development, but also with some of the merchant interest as well. So the question that we often get is, okay, this is all great. PWA is the future, but reality is, Magento didn't invent PWA. PWA is just a term. It's been around actually as long as Magento 2. It's a set of standards. It's essentially the next evolution of responsive web design. But PWA Studio itself is really just a set of developer tools. The problems that it solves for is really around scaffolding. So the idea around creating a new PWA or storefront on Magento 2. It's around creating and replacing, so writing your own components and intercepts. And the concept that you saw a lot from Lars today, which is around extensibility. So looking at concepts and ideas like targetables that James has delivered here in the last couple of weeks, and really making this the premise of the installation of extensions and the replacement of our default components. So when we start to ask yourself the question, is Venya done yet? The reality is that's just a small part of what we're doing. Venya itself has its own UI components. What we'll go through here at the end is really a roadmap of what's done and what's left. We are making we continue to make active progress on things like My Account and a couple of other features. But all of this rides on the coverage and the work that's happening in GraphQL, which is managed by the Apollo client. Peregrine itself is also a set of components. These are very similar to React hooks, if you're familiar with those. And those help us really understand and I would say abstract the business logic that's happening on the UI components themselves. So again, when you ask yourself the question, is Venya done yet? The reality is it's just one of several aspects of PWA Studio itself that ultimately, again, is a set of developer tools that will become the default Magento 2 front end. So let's talk a little bit about how this is being built. Again, for those who haven't seen this yet, the reality is the Magento PWA Studio project has been fast following all the GraphQL work that's been done to date since Magento 2.3 in November of 2018. And the reality is we are closing the gaps on a lot of the B2C coverage, most of which has been done in 2.4.1, and actively starting to get involved in some of the work in B2B. Some of that coverage coming in early next year, which Nishant will talk about. But ultimately, this is all feeding the components, both the Venya and the Peregrine components, but also the new default front end and reference theme that is Venya. But all of this then comes down to what does it mean to develop, optimize, and deploy. And that's where PWA Studio sets in. And so we're encouraged by the progress here, but ultimately we're using our own products to shape the APIs into what essentially is going to be the headless strategy for Magento. So let's talk a little bit about the progress. Again, in the longer version of this, we would go through in glorious detail all the different case studies and a lot of the progress we've seen to date. We're incredibly encouraged by what we're seeing is in terms of an uptick in the usage and really the launches of stores using PWA Studio. To date, we have 45 of them. We're seeing a handful of these each week using sources like Built With and just word of mouth. To date, we've seen third-party extensions, roughly about 20 or so of them, including both extensions and themes, which also include GoMage. You've probably seen some of that a little bit today. And we're seeing you're seeing an increase in both stars and clones in GitHub as well. We track those fairly carefully just to make sure that we're hitting the mark, but also really wanting to make sure that we're shaping the product in the way that really matters most. So every day, as you've probably seen, we spend a lot of time with our members in our Magento community. We talk to roughly 2,200 a day, and they've helped us influence and shape the product that we need to as well. And that's really a big part of what we're doing. It's really almost more important how we're doing this versus what we're doing. We're very proud of what we're doing, but really this would not be where it is without the 120 contributors to date and without community maintainers like Jordan and Lars, who continue to be at the forefront for not only helping others get involved in this brand new way of front end for Magento, but really starting to push the limits. We are just scratching the surface on this as an industry, and Magento is leading the way. And so we're super excited about this. But again, none of this would be possible without the community, not only in terms of the contribution, but the engagement and the feedback that we get regularly. So we're really, really proud about this, and we keep this up to date on a regular basis. So with Magento 2.4.1, we released PWA Studio 8. PWA Studio 8, in many ways, was a performance and quality release. We added over 100 updates to date, some of which came in by way of the community, but really started to make progress on key areas of our venue reference storefront, but also started to include previews of aspects like My Account, but also a brand new mini cart. We refactored that, which we think was going to be a lot more lightweight and a lot more effective based on some of the GraphQL features and functionality that came into the previous release. Again, think about that fast follow between the GraphQL happening and PWA shortly afterwards. And in addition, we upgraded to Apollo Client 3, which again allows you to interface and manage more effectively those GraphQL connections. We have a live demo here. We also have a development demo as well. And so I encourage you to take a look at a lot of the great progress that has been made to date, especially if you haven't seen it for a while. So we're going to close here on the current roadmap itself for PWA Studio. Again, a lot of this is out there in the open. You can take a look at this with some of the links that we'll provide at the end. But the reality is we have 3 different queues: in progress, backlog, and planning. In progress, you'll see a handful of these. The items here with the check mark and 8 are the items that were just released with PWA 8, including the mini cart refactor, the GraphQL support, which of course came in with 2.4.0 and 2.4.1, then your style guide improvements, extensibility, which we've started to see some of that in progress, and of course, ongoing performance and quality. But we do have some work to do. So some of the items here that you see with the tickets are items that we're asking some help from the community. Areas like add to home, areas like mega menu, which we've seen some good examples on with some of the earlier launches, but also some areas like My Account, which we know are in development. So if you take a look at our development branch, that's going to be a key part of PWA Studio 9 that we're expecting and hopefully bringing in closer to when 2.4.2 happens, which we're pretty excited about. But we're going to continue going. We've got a lot of work to do around payment support in other areas, none of which of these, though, are blockers. Again, if you see the 45 stores to date, all of which have their own different business objectives and approaches to what they're trying to do, it's been found to be much easier to work with, extend both the GraphQL endpoints, but also the components and Veni as a whole, especially once you know React. And so I would see these as really just areas of customization. And the reality is we'll have a much more robust and complete offering, certainly around B2C, which will include these areas of My Account, which will be a big piece. Multi-store and multi-site capabilities, which is actively in development, as you see with that lightning bolt as well. And then areas like cloud and server-side rendering improvements, where we've got a couple community options from Jordan, the Experience team, to work through that as well. But we're going to continue to make that better and better out of the box. So we're continuing to make progress on this. We're open and transparent with the work done, and of course, if you have any questions about this, we can make ourselves available. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Nishant, who's going to talk about everything other than the head, so the rest, so to speak. So.
All right, thank you, Eric. That was very insightful. Hey, everyone. So I will, Eric, next slide. You can go to the next slide. So I will start very, very basic. What is headless commerce? And as I talk to more and more merchants and more developers, I think everyone seems to have a common understanding, but a lot of people think headless commerce means microservices. Some people mean it's API. But in the really basic definition of headless commerce is API first. So you have your business logic available via API so that you can have parity of functionality across many touch points that you are building to communicate and interact with your customers. So that's a very literal sense. That's what headless commerce means. And the benefits, as I said, it will provide parity across multiple touch points. If you have a native mobile application or your traditional website, or you are building an in-store app, you can use the same set of functionality across all those touch points. And you are centralizing your logic, you are building it once and making it available across all those touch points. It also provides developer agility. So if the platform is API first, you can have several different teams work on several different touch points independently without actually stepping on each other. Whereas if in a traditional monolithic platform, all the code goes into a central location, and it's just one big application, which has UI aspects to it as well. So That's another big benefit of headless commerce that we don't generally talk about. Next is performance and scalability. This is actually a direct consequence of Magento using GraphQL instead of REST API. So it solves N+1 problem, if you are familiar with that. And basically, it's you with GraphQL, you're trying to avoid multiple round trips. So you can pass a query and you can request all the data that you need to render a page or an experience. And then last but not the least is visibility and control. So if you have all your functionality available in your API layer, you can put controls in place. You have visibility into what's available, what's not available. You can build things like feature toggle to make certain features available on certain touch points and disable certain features for certain other touch points. So all of these things, I think we just, when we talk headless commerce, we just talk about, yes, API first, but I just wanted to give you my point of view of what I think in talking to merchants and other customers. This is what I'm communicating. The benefit of headless commerce is just more than having an API. So on the next slide, I will give you an overview of where we are headed as a Magento platform. So if you heard Igor Minialo's presentation and Igor Melnikov's presentation, it'll try to summarize everything on this slide. And this is not an architecture diagram. This is just my way to communicate all the different moving parts that we are working on. So at the very top, what we are working on is a commerce data graph layer, which is the independent GraphQL server. So if you are familiar with Magento, GraphQL is actually very tightly coupled in the monolith. So if you have a catalog module, you'll have a catalog GraphQL. So everything is very tightly coupled. And with this initiative, what we are trying to do is extract that GraphQL layer out from the monolith into its own application. And we are going to use TypeScript and JavaScript to build that layer. And that layer will, developers and merchants will have the ability to deploy that layer as an independent container so that it can scale and perform independently without actually relying on any of the monolith and underneath services. And we want that layer to become the abstraction layer, which will be responsible to communicate and get data from all the services underneath. So it could be monolith, it could be the new microservices that we are building, it could be any custom service that you have or a third-party service. So at the top level, this is what we are paying a lot of attention on. And we are being very mindful of breaking changes. So one of the acceptance criteria for this product is the graph cannot have backwards compatible. So the graph has to be backwards compatible. We are not going to introduce any breaking changes in the graph. So if we have to change something, we'll do it gracefully by making it deprecated and adding new functionality. So, and this is where we are also introducing a governance process where we are going to have the GraphQL schema available in a centralized repository. And any changes to the graph will have to be will have to go through that repository. So if you want to change something in graph, you will have to submit a pull request to that repository. We will have a series of static tests to make sure the changes are backwards compatible. It's following best practices. And then we'll also have series of tests where we'll ensure that on the implementation side, we are actually implementing the schema that was checked into this repository. So a lot of work is going on here. I think we have the centralized GraphQL repository created internally. We are working to make that open, and as soon as it is open, we will put an announcement in the public Slack group. So that's the first layer, commerce data graph. The next layer is where we have started our microservices initiative to break down the monolith into smaller microservices. And before I go deep into that, we just want to make sure I communicate that these are all opt-in changes. So if you are using monolith, you can continue to use monolith. It's not going to impact you. So we are not directly making changes inside of the monolith. So these are going to be released as additional services that you can install either with the monolith or as a separate service. So the three services that we are working on right now are catalog, default search, and pricing. And these services will have its own data store, and these services will also have gRPC API. So what we are, from an extensibility standpoint, what we are moving towards is making sure every service has a protocol buffer contract, which we are currently in our case, we are using code generation libraries to convert the Google protocol contracts to PHP interfaces. But those Google protocol buffer contracts will be also available for extensibility. So if you want to convert them to Java interfaces or any other preferred language, you could do that and overwrite those contracts outside of Magento application. And in our initial testing, we have seen that gRPC over HTTP2 is significantly faster than HTTP1 or our traditional communication protocol. So and one of the goals that we are targeting is also performance. So we want to make sure these services are highly scalable, highly performant, and they will be stateful from the get-go. So this is the services layer that we are building. We'll continue to just add more and more services. And as you install, for example, a catalog microservice, all the requests from the graph will route to this microservice instead of going to the monolith. The layer below is our, and I've greatly generalized this diagram, is the events framework, basically data in and out of the Magento platform. So we are also working on making sure that we have the ability to event out all Magento data into a service bus. So all your actions like customer create, update, order create, any action that happens, and we have the API for that in Magento, we'll make sure a message is dropped in the event framework. And then from there, the data can be pushed to either an integration platform or any custom warehouse where you want to push the data. So you'll have more flexibility. I think our goal is to make sure we have a common framework and we have a common repository where we can just push the data, and then from there, it will depend on the use case where the data needs to go.
Nishant, so this is Nishant, I hate to interrupt you. Sorry for that, but your presentation time is up in 5 minutes. So okay, let's move to wrap up, okay?
Yeah, so that's, 5 more minutes. All right, next slide. Right?
Yep.
So, all right. So these the GraphQL APIs can also be extended, and I have a couple of examples in next 2 slides where I will explain how these APIs can be extended. So, Eric, if you can go to the next slide. So here at the GraphQL layer, what we want to do is make it flexible for developers to extend the GraphQL schema and extend the graph layer in such a way that it's out of process. So the developers will be able to add schema to graph and then specify a remote resolver, which will call a remote implementation. So in this example, if you call GraphQL to get inventory, you can have an additional function which makes a call to an external warehouse to get the real-time inventory information. So when the GraphQL call comes in, it will grab the inventory data from Magento, whatever it's there. It will make an additional call to the external warehouse to get that real-time external inventory, package the response, and return it. So all of this can happen in real time. And from a schema level, the way it'll look, Eric, if you can go to the next slide, so let's take another example of product interface. So product interface today has ratings and reviews that we just released as the default ratings and reviews implementation of Magento. But if you want to integrate to, let's say, any third-party ratings and review platform, what you can do is you can extend the schema, and all your schema extensions will be prefixed with your namespace to avoid naming collisions. And then from there, you can specify a remote resolver which will directly call the third party to get the ratings and reviews data and fill this part of the graph and return the data. So all of this can happen outside of Magento, still leveraging the core Magento framework and the graph layer. And if we get to this level where all the extensions are getting built outside of core Magento platform, this is going to make upgrade process significantly simpler because you're not changing the core platform. You are still able to make similar changes, but you are implementing the logic outside of Magento. So that's all. If you want to learn more, we are short on time. If you want to learn more, please feel free to ping me on Slack. I am happy to walk you all through this again. And we generally do once a month hangout session to talk about all this. And I'm happy to cover this topic next time. So Eric, if you go to the next slide, that's the last one I have, is this the roadmap for GraphQL. So everything that you see under now and second half of 20 is pretty much done. And if it's an open source feature, it should be available in the develop branch, so you can go check it out. And everything that is in H1 21 is something that we are working on right now. And I would like to show my gratitude towards this community. Community has helped tremendously on the GraphQL roadmap in 2020, specifically Atwix and Yaroslav and team. They have really stepped in and significantly accelerated this roadmap in 2020. So I really appreciate all your help and rest of the community members who contributed to GraphQL. And I look forward to a similar contribution model in 2021. Cool.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And now we've got 5 minutes for questions and answers. So everyone, please write your possible questions in chat, and I will read it out loud. Let's wait for a couple of seconds. And in case we wouldn't have, then we'll switch to another.
Yeah, so there is a question from Dennis. His question is, and I'll read the question, extending schema locally with your custom logic is nice from the point of doing merchant-specific customizations, but current extensibility level doesn't seem to cover many of the extension developers need. So yes, you are correct, Dennis. The only extension point that I covered in the presentation was the GraphQL layer. We are going to allow similar extension points at the service levels as well. So as I mentioned briefly, the proto contracts that we are building at the services layer will also be available for extension. So these are service contracts. If you need to do and if you're building an extension that needs to do something in catalog or ratings or reviews, there will be APIs available to do similar extensibility outside of core Magento platform. Yeah, I think so. The extensibility piece is something very critical to us, and then we are paying a lot of attention and making sure we cover all the use cases. And I haven't really covered extensibility in detail on this presentation. So what we will do is during our next community hangout, which will most likely be first week of November, we will cover extensibility and talk about all the extension points that we will make available.